All right. So we got tips. We talked about tips on Sunday. We talked about tips. How to do good grad school applications. How to do good grad school applications. And honestly, that's really what I want to talk about. I sort of want to rephrase these kisses of death to be less like, hey, don't do this, and more of, yeah, maybe you shouldn't do this, but let's think of a way that you can do this, that you can, rephrase, reformat, reframe, let's say. So this is coming up on 14 years old, spring 2007. So it's been around for a while, but not a lot of people talk about it. And I think I mentioned it to some of my students last year, the year before. So 1 or 2 years ago when they were doing their applications. And I kind of want to add this to my compendium of grad school advice and specifically application advice. So let's jump into this. So this is from Psych, the Honor Society in Psychology. So Ion Psych is their magazine where they talk about research. And this, again, is from spring 2007, number 3. So it's coming up on 14 years now. And it's based on the research of 2 Applebys, Drew Appleby and Karen Appleby. So this is a write-up from an actual research project that the two of these researchers did in 2006, I believe. They surveyed 88 programs, something like that, on their application processes and what they do for these applications and how they just throw people into the trash pile and whatnot. So I'll call them KODs from now on, just like the article does, as you can see there, because kisses of death just going to get tiresome over and over and over again. So KODs, okay, it's qualitative analysis. And so what they did, I was going to use some slides, but then I felt a little weird by even though I was going to give them credit for the slides, a little weird just kind of using using their language and stuff. It's not my research, so I can't speak to the methodology and stuff like that, just the outcomes. And so I just went to the Ion Psych here, which is a little bit more, I don't know if they must have written them themselves. Yeah. So here are, and so what they did was they took major themes and sort of encapsulated what they could find from this qualitative research study. Now, difference between qualitative and quantitative. Quantitative is numbers. That's what you do the math on. And then qualitative is more of an interview process. It's more interview. It's more holistic. You're getting context and phrasing that it's sometimes a little bit more difficult to deal with. So, yes, continue. I wasn't even logged in, but okay. So we're going to go through these, and I've zoomed in as much as I can. And we're going to start with the one that I think gets a little lost, especially when we talk about kisses of death. Now, this is more or less geared towards psychology graduate school applications. And we can broaden that out a little bit more to other sorts of social sciences, but I hesitate to say these are kisses of death for every graduate school, humanities, the hard and biological sciences and things like that, because for one thing, the prompts are going to be slightly different for personal statements and things like that. And you're going to be viewed in a different light. Like if you're trying to get into a literary PhD program, I think the emphasis is more on your literary skills and your work rather than your desire to be doing research in something that is seemingly personal. So that's a good first of all, that's a good disclaimer for these particular bad boys. But what I also want to thing on top of my head. Okay. The first thing is probably the most important thing that gets lost in a lot of counseling or clinical applications, which is avoiding references to your own personal mental health. I know that might seem counterintuitive for a counseling or clinical graduate program, whether it's master's or a master's or a doctoral program. But honestly, while it is interesting that you want to investigate perhaps something that is similar to your own life experience, other people don't actually want to hear about that. They also don't want to be sucked into a pity situation. I mean, they'll probably have some sympathy or some empathy. I'm not saying that they're going to discount that admissions committees and faculty are going to discount your experiences and your mental health struggles. I'm just saying that it's important to put a good foot forward and not cloud judgment about success in grad school, because not only are you going to be doing research that, makes sense to you and makes sense to your personal experiences and what interests you, but you're also going to be beholden to deadline, or maybe I shouldn't say deadlines. I should be broader than that. You're going to be beholden to significant progress through X number of years, right? Doing coursework and doing things like your dissertation and other outside research. So unless it's super, super important in your personal statement to pivot around some mental health struggle, I tend to tell my students to back off and be as vague as possible. Be as vague as possible about it, because you don't want to show, people, especially your potential advisor, that you are volatile. I don't mean that in a negative way, that they just can't predict. Because they don't know you, they're trying not to make assumptions about you before meeting you. And so if you give them all of these things about you and your assumption, and they make assumptions about that sort of is on you to smooth over, but they don't actually owe you anything to smooth that over. So avoid talking about any sort of mental health struggles and other things joining in the personal statements. Next one, avoid excessively altruistic statements. For example, I just want to help people. That's great. Go volunteer. And I don't mean that to be glib. It's just that for a potential advisor to accept you on, they need to be able to, they need to see that you are able to articulate how you want to help people. Because the goal here is to either learn the skills practically, or to help people, be a practitioner, or learn the skills for research to then be able to study things and increase our pool of how, right? We need to be able to articulate further paths. And this is why having a lot of eyes on your personal statement is so important, because you get rid of these platitudes. You get rid of these very empty statements that are just there to fill space. You shouldn't be filling space with these cliche sentences, these sentences that really are all in all fluff. And I know undergraduates do learn in 4 years how to be really good at fluff, myself included. But you gotta have the articulation to specifically identify where your path is going in the moment. Avoid providing excessively self-revealing information. It's not fluff, it's BSing. Yeah, it's very true. It's very, very true. There's a fine line, I suppose. Mine was more along the BSing side for sure, for sure. So this one, I'm surprised they didn't include this one right after this one, because they sort of go hand in hand. Because most of the time people include information specifically about their mental health that is too much, right? Keep boundaries. Keep boundaries together. So don't tell people that you potentially attempted to take your own life. No, that's neither the place nor the audience, right? Neither the place nor the audience for that kind of stuff. And I've actually had to I've had to pull the brakes on a couple of students who have had similar experiences or that exact experience that I just named, and they put it in their personal statement. It was a little ambiguous and a little vague. But I said, nope, you got to take you got to take the whole reference. I don't care how vague it is. You got to take that out of there, because it is a huge red flag. It's a huge red flag. And I thankfully both are doing fantastically, but for somebody that you don't know, you got to keep that walled off. You got to keep that walled off. Avoid inappropriate humor, attempts at being cute or clever, references to God or religious issues, especially when these issues are unrelated to the program to which you are applying. Yeah, so references to God and one's own personal religiosity or spirituality is fine for divinity school. So if you want to go get an MDiv or a DDiv, by all means, or a doctorate of theology or something like that, by all means, talk about your relationship with God. But it is not appropriate in a scientific graduate school application. So remove all references to God there, or your own personal religiosity or spirituality. That might be nice, but you might also then reflect on who your audience is, who's going to be reading the personal statement. It's going to be a bunch of strangers reading your personal statement. So maybe don't throw in that personal information there. Inappropriate humor. This is stuff that would be, generally speaking, would not be allowed, I don't know, on primetime TV. I know there's a lot of leeway in primetime TV now, especially if you use euphemisms and double entendres and stuff like that. But I would say keep that to a minimum. And there's a practical reason for keeping it to a minimum too. One of those reasons are that in the limited amount of space that you have for this personal statement, it's probably just taking up space. And I'm not saying perhaps replace it with something else to fill the space. Maybe just don't have the sentence at all. Sometimes shorter statements are better than longer ones. Even if they give you like, hey, you've got 4 pages, don't worry about it. Consider again who you are, who you're writing to, who your audience is, that sort of thing. So attempts to appear cute or clever. Yeah, it's going to fall flat. So dad jokes for sure are going to fall flat in text form unless they're written really well. So you might as well not. Satire, irony, sardonism, all of that stuff is going to fall flat in text form. And now, yes, you are writing to people who are intellectual and perhaps generally above average intelligence, and they probably picked that up. But I wouldn't risk it. I honestly wouldn't risk it. I also would not risk extended metaphors either. Because and my point with that one is because extended metaphors get lost. Unless you're a really good writer, like you're a minor in literature or something like that, or fiction. Extended metaphors tend to get students lost. I even get lost while trying to maintain an analogy for too long. Like it's tough for, I would say, the vast majority of writers. So if you don't want to get lost in translation, avoid extended metaphors, avoid extended analogies. Just be matter of fact with it. Just try to speak plainly. And even though it may be difficult to speak super plainly, I think you're fine on that one. You know, don't give them a reason to roll their eyes. Let's just say that. Don't give them a reason to go scoff and roll their eyes and then run away. Nah, run away. All right, so that's a personal statement. Not terrible. To sum it up, things to avoid in your personal statement are references to revealing information, your mental health struggles, or your current mental health state, being sort of flippant and vague with overly altruistic statements, because honestly, nobody's that altruistic. And try to reflect on who your audience is, because and be matter of fact and speak plainly to your reader. So that's the personal statement. Let's move down here to letters of recommendation. Letters of recommendation, my favorite. So this is obviously written for the application writer. So an undergraduate student trying to get into graduate school. So I would say that this is not written for me. It's written for somebody that I would be writing a letter for. So these 2 bullet points, they're pretty important. But I can give some additional advice about this, which may not be a KOD, but in general, just good practices about letters of recommendation, sort of repeating what I'd said on my last stream on Wednesday. So the first one is avoid letters of recommendation from people who do not know you well, whose portrayals of your characteristics may not be objective, so no relatives. Or who may be unable to base their descriptions in an academic context. So nobody like a minister, okay? So these need to be your professors who have seen you in more than one class, hopefully. Now, I said on Wednesday, I didn't do my undergrad degree all that correct. It was correct for me at the time, but it was not good for graduate school. because of my inability to really make inroads with any professor. It just wasn't happening. It wasn't until my last semester that I got something reasonably close to a hey, I know that guy kind of relationship with one faculty member. God bless him, because I think honestly, without his letter of recommendation, I wouldn't be right. I would not be right here right now. So lots of things can happen to get you going, but yeah, it was bad. I got another letter of recommendation from a current graduate student, but I had taken because she was adjuncting at the school that I was an undergraduate at. I got her because she was at least an instructor for me at. So this was my first go with letters of recommendation. I was a little bit better at it when I was getting into my PhD program. I'll be honest with you, it was a little bit easier in that vein. But like my first go at it, once I was done with being an undergraduate, so I got this one instructor who I had for one class in my last semester of undergrad. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word. I got this adjunct who was a current graduate student. She had her master's degree, but she was still only a current graduate student, unfortunately. And then my boss at the place that I worked. Not a great set of letters of recommendation, I'll tell you what. They need to be objective. They need to be professionally relevant. So if you're doing an internship, get your internship director or your supervisor, direct supervisor. Do that. Get the professional recommendations. So 3 faculty is always really, really good. 2 faculty plus a internship supervisor, if it was a supervisor or if it was an internship that is directly related to the program skill set. So like if you went and if you're trying for a counseling or clinical master's or PhD or whatever, and you went and worked at the psych ward of a hospital for an internship, like get that one for sure. So 2 faculty and then that internship, or 3 faculty. That is what is viewed. And faculty generally here means somebody with a terminal degree in their field. So if you're talking about science, you're talking about PhDs in all 3 cases. In humanities and arts, it could be a master's degree, it could be an MFA. I know DFA exists, but it's not considered a terminal degree in art, which is nice for people who want to get tenure for. I know it's digression there. All right, second letter of recommendation, case of a death. Avoid a letter of recommendation author who will provide unflattering descriptions of your personal or academic characteristics. So how I approach this one is, so let's say student A comes up to me, and student A and I have had some struggles over our time together as teacher to student. They're not the best student. They take a lot of energy and work. Not something that I'm, antagonistic toward or don't want to do. It takes a lot more work. And letters of recommendation are supposed to be honest characterizations of somebody's ability to succeed in graduate school. And if student A came up to me and said, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? This is what I say, knowing student A. I say, I'd be happy to write you a letter of recommendation. but first you must know something. Get it? No. First you got to know something. No. So, but first I need to tell you something to be completely honest with you. My letters are written honestly. And you've had some struggles in my classes. Perhaps not academically, but, motivationally and other reasons. And so I will mention those things. Do you still want me to write you a letter? If they say yes, there it goes. If they say, oh, okay, no then, well then they've avoided this kiss of death. Okay? Ask them if they are able to write you a strong letter of recommendation. That could be another way that the student then approaches the instructor, like me. Instead of me saying, okay, well, I want you to know something first, they could say, can you write me a strong letter? If I say no, then I think it's unstated that it's not going to be a wonderful letter. I won't send in my enthusiastic recommendation. I've said no to some people too, and then have explained why. Yeah, I have done that as well. Not often, which is nice. I think some people who might be on the fence about it probably haven't asked. So that's interesting. We'll see if that changes. So next major issue is lack of information about the program to which you're applying. Okay. If you're going to flatter somebody, know who you're talking to. Even before looking at those bullet points, if you're going to flatter somebody because you want something in return for that flattery, know what you're talking about. Don't call people by wrong names. Make sure the letter you're sending to school A does not have the name of school B in the personal statement or the cover letter or whatever it is that you have to create. I was applying to a butt ton of jobs, and I was so freaked out about this in cover letters. I tailored every single cover letter, and so I have mounds and mounds and mounds of digital files. Get it? Because they're really tiny. I have loads of digital files for every single job that I applied to, and every single one has a different cover letter in it. It's rough. It's tough to be that conscientious and detail-oriented. It takes a lot out of you. So I tell my students to try to tailor their personal statements, because honestly, that's the big one. I don't think I had to do cover letters for graduate school applications, so I don't think that's really a thing for graduate school applications. I think the cover letter is the application. But I definitely recommend tailoring personal statements, putting this name of the school in there, putting the name of the program, like the literal name of the program, and just straight up target that one, right? Learn about the program, drop some specifics. Obviously, you're going to want to talk about the people that you want to work with. If you're applying to some sort of apprenticeship model program, like a Ph.D. program, that sort of thing. Avoid statements that indicate you and the target program are a perfect fit if these statements are not corroborated with specific evidence to support your assertion. Okay. I'll even go as far as saying you shouldn't say perfect fit even if your research aligns with program faculty. I think that's a bit too much of hubris. Like, oh yeah, Dr. So-and-so does the same thing as me, and even though I have research to support that, they're going to love it because I'm doing the same thing as them. And we can do so many things together. Yes, it is a bit presumptuous. It is not. I would say just be like, I think it's a good fit because of X, Y, and Z. Because you can't assume what somebody else might want. Maybe they want to drop that research subject and focus on something new, or the stuff that's on their website is like 5 years out of date, because that's always a thing, right? And websites aren't updated frequently, especially school research interests, like a school site for a faculty bio. Like, it's a good. My PhD advisor's picture and his research interests and his selected publications were all like 10 years out of date by the time I even was trying to apply to him. Like, it's not even worth it. You have to talk to the person at the time. So I would not do this. Perfect fit is presumptuous, as Science Stream said. Couple more major themes. Three more bullet points here. Avoid spelling or grammatical errors in your application. So I mentioned this one on my Wednesday stream, talking about tips for doing the application process. And it's just like, you gotta be so detail oriented in this, and personal statements and other things that you have to produce writing for it. You can't have any mistakes in them, especially if they're glaring mistakes, which is why you need a lot of eyeballs. It's also very important to, before you send it, look at it with fresh eyes. So what are fresh eyes? A day or two, and sometimes the longer the better, of not looking at the statement at all and trying your best not to think about it too, and then coming back to it with not remembering every single detail of how it looked. That's how you're going to spot errors. And potentially changing up sentences here and there. Like, fresh eyes editing is so important. So important, like, for any writing. So definitely do that. Fresh eyes editing several times if you can, depending on, how much you are up against the clock, that sort of thing. The other thing that I would say is, as I said, is get as many eyes on it as possible that aren't your own, and people with, obviously writing skill. So your advisors and things like that. That would obviously be very important. And then, what else? Oh yeah. I think this is pretty cool. Microsoft partnered That's what I want. Partnered with Grammarly. So in recent updates of Office 365, you now have access to a Grammarly plugin. I haven't messed around with it because I haven't been in an Office product in a while to do writing. I've just been, off and on doing syllabus prep, and so there's really no reason. But Grammarly, which started off as like a web plugin to catch your writing, and then it also had its own website where you can just you could paste text or upload a file or whatever. Now you don't even have to do that. You just have the Office 365 product like Word, and look at the Grammarly, and it will tell you, if you have words that you use too often, bad grammar, spelling, punctuation. This is one that I love, that I haven't used enough, which is, what is it called? It's called something like, I think I'll just call it a tone identifier. Something like it'll tell you if you're being too apologetic, or it'll tell you if you're being too submissive or too passive. Not passive voice, although it will tell you whether or not you're using passive voice too much, just like regular word spell check and grammar check will do. But it will tell you whether or not if you're being too meek or submissive, passive, that kind of. It's super interesting. These AI tools in language are just phenomenal, and I expect them to get even more phenomenal as the years advance here, as we advance into this third decade of the second millennium. Okay, so avoid spelling or grammatical errors, of course. Avoid writing in unclear, disorganized, and unconvincing manner. Okay, so as we mentioned previously when we're talking about this, the idea here is to make sure that you are genuine, you are enthusiastic, you are specific, and you are a good investment. You got to make the case that they are going to invest their time and energy into you, both on an academic level and even a personal level, regardless of what kind of program you're applying to. Like, even if you only know these people for 2 years because you're doing a master's program, or you know these people for 6 years because you're doing a doctoral program, or anywhere in between, like, they're also going to invest their personal effort and energy into you. So you got to make the case that you are worth that while being genuine, specific, and enthusiastic. It's a hard bill to pay, or bill to fit, or whatever. But they want to make sure that you can express yourself in writing. That you can express yourself in writing. Oof. Probably the number one kiss of death here. Actually, not number one. I would say number 3. Number 3, I would say, on my list. Okay, one more bullet point. All right. Let's do this last one so I can talk about these admissions, this resource that I think is wonderful that I didn't know about when I was a graduate school. So, misfired attempts to impress. Avoid attempts to impress the number of graduate admissions committee with information that they may interpret as insincere flattery. So, for example, referring to the target program in excessively complimentary manner. Oh, so you know, the Ohio State University is by far the best university ever. They're gonna beat Alabama tomorrow. Go Buckeyes! Like, no, don't do that. Or inappropriate. Name dropping or blaming others for poor academic performance. Definitely don't do that. Definitely don't do that. Again, consider who you are writing for. So who's reading it? Who that person is, what their characteristics are, and don't try to game it, because they will tell you to get the heck out of there so fast. So, yeah. Those are your graduate school kisses of death, the graduate school applications. So when you get into graduate school, the kisses of death are a bit different.